The movie opens in Monument Valley, where we see a family consisting of a man named Royce Garrett and his two children, Peter and Annie, climbing a cliff. They are joking together when, all of a sudden, it turns out there are two amateur climbers nearby, and they cause Royce, Peter, and Annie to be yanked off their safety harnesses. Even worse, the two climbers below them lose their grip due to the excessive weight, leaving the father and his children hanging from a single anchor. Next, Annie struggles to reach the rock face to place another anchor, and the hook holding them won't last much longer. With no other choice, Royce, who is at the bottom, orders Peter to cut him loose with a knife, or else the entire family will die. Upon hearing this, Peter hesitates, while Annie panics and begs her brother not to do it. But under his father's pressure, Peter eventually makes the difficult decision and cuts the rope, sending his father plummeting to his death below. The scene then cuts to 3 years later in northern Pakistan, where we see Peter photographing snow leopards amidst the mountains. Later, while leaving the area with his guide, the weather begins to worsen, and suddenly the guide slips and breaks his leg. A panicked Peter calls for help from the authorities and has the injured man taken by helicopter. As the helicopter flies away, a magazine blows out of a nearby tent, and it features Annie Garrett, who has become the fastest female climber to complete multiple ascents. Meanwhile, on the helicopter, the pilot informs Peter that he will take him to the Siachen Glacier, where there is a doctor and medical supplies. He says he will drop Peter off on the way to K2 base camp and inform him that Annie is there as well. Next, they arrive at a Pakistani army outpost that is constantly at war with Indian troops. Peter is shocked to learn that the military is only receiving 25% of the total medical supplies delivered by the helicopter. The remaining supplies are reserved for an American billionaire named Elliot Vaughn, who has brought a team of 40 people with him to climb K2. Later, while heading to K2 base camp, the pilot informs Peter that Annie is also on Elliot's team, as she is leading a WNN documentary crew. He also reveals that 4 years ago, Elliot's team attempted the south face and was just 800 feet from the summit when the weather closed Indiana. Despite spending 24 hours in the death zone, Elliot managed to descend the next day, revealing that he is a highly skilled climber. Upon arriving at the base camp, Peter meets Annie, and they awkwardly exchange a brief conversation. She reveals that they are leaving tomorrow and plan to summit the mountain by 2 p.m., and Peter finds it odd that she's scheduling a summit. But Annie justifies herself, saying she admires Elliot, as he's a man who knows what he wants and goes for it. Not far away, we see a bearded, long-haired man massaging his feet, which are missing toes. He soon hears a noise and emerges from his tent to witness two helicopters approaching. Shortly after, the helicopters land at the base camp, and from one of them emerges the wealthy billionaire, Elliot Vaughn. He warmly greets Annie and a man named Tom McLaren, who is one of his team members. Later, Peter meets a mountaineer named Skip, who reveals that the whole expedition is actually a massive advertising campaign to promote Elliot's new airline company. Apparently, Elliot paid Tom a whole $1 million to take him to the summit, as Tom is one of the greatest mountaineers. They are then interrupted by a woman named Monique, and Skip says she is their base camp manager and medic. That night, Elliot throws a huge party for his team members, during which he talks about the incident when he tried to conquer K2, and it all ended in tragedy. He is confident in his success this time, but just then, he is interrupted by the arrival of the same bearded old man, who begins asking about the weather. Elliot replies that his specialist has analyzed the weather conditions for 40 years, and there is nothing to worry about. The old man asks who the leader is that makes decisions about life and death, to which Elliot says it is the best climber, Tom McLaren. Later, Peter meets with his sister and tells her that the old man from earlier is Montgomery Wick, who served in the army alongside their dad. However, this conversation only makes Annie uncomfortable, and it turns out she still blames Peter for their father's death. She believes they could have saved him back then, and claims she is climbing K2 in his memory, while Peter abandoned climbing after what happened. The next morning, the day of the ascent arrives, and Elliot and his team, which includes Annie, Tom, and many others, proceed to leave by helicopter. Peter watches his sister with concern, and his attention is drawn to a small stone memorial for a woman. Later, while the climbers are getting ready for the ascent, Tom receives a message from the base camp about worsening weather conditions. He suggests to Elliot that they need to turn back, but the billionaire is against it, as he wants to reach the top at any cost. He suggests they can hide in an ice cliff if the storm arrives, and even Annie supports his idea, which leaves Tom with no choice but to comply. At the base camp, the support team learns that winds are intensifying and rapidly approaching the climbing party. Soon, Peter also arrives and hears about the worsening weather, so he panics and forcefully seizes the radio. He warns Tom about an incoming major storm, but Tom continues moving until Skip intervenes and explains the seriousness of the situation. This worries Tom, so he tells Elliot they need to return immediately, but the billionaire still refuses, leading to an argument between them. With no other choice, Tom begins moving, but the storm soon arrives, putting them in a dangerous situation. Tom realizes they cannot go any further, so he finally orders everyone to turn back, including Elliot, who curses at the mountain before leaving. However, it is too late to retreat, as the storm has already engulfed the climbers, making it difficult to breathe, and visibility is practically zero. Moments later, Annie falls through the snow and lands in a crevasse inside an ice cave, but fortunately, she does not sustain any injuries. Then, a huge avalanche comes down from the mountain, sweeping everything away. Few climbers die in the process, but only Elliot and Tom manage to escape by scrambling into the crevasse where Annie is. The trio is now trapped, blocked by tons of snow, and Annie notices that Tom is badly injured from the fall. Elliot tries to call for help via radio, but realizes they've lost communication with the base camp. Back at base camp, everyone is devastated, and Peter hears static on the radio, which gives him an idea. He begins communicating in Morse code, which is understood by Annie on the other side. As it turns out, their father taught them this when they were kids. She responds back and manages to convey the message that there are 3 survivors, including herself, Elliot, and Tom. Following this, Peter decides to go on a rescue operation, but the others are very reluctant, as survival at such an extreme altitude is nearly impossible. Skip tells Peter that the victims have a maximum of 36 hours before they develop pulmonary edema. Here, Peter recalls how Wick, who is also a renowned mountaineer, climbed K2 in 24 hours, and decides to do whatever it takes to save his sister. Next, Peter needs something to break through the ice, so he asks the Pakistani army for help, and they agree to share the nitroglycerin they have, which can be used to blast rock. In the evening, Peter and Skip try to assemble a team of 6 experienced climbers who will make a high-speed ascent of K2 carrying nitroglycerin canisters on their backs. But everyone thinks the idea is madness, except for a man named Kareem, whose cousin is one of the victims, and Kareem hopes he may still be alive. Then, 2 brothers, Malcolm and Cyril, also agree to join, but they still need one more member. As a result, one of Elliot's men offers $500,000 to anyone who agrees to go, whether Elliot returns alive or not. Back in the crevasse, Elliot sets some rules on how to divide the supplies to avoid the risk of pulmonary edema: half a cup of water for each person every 2 hours, followed by fuel cells to melt ice into water, and finally, syringes with dexamethasone. He also orders Annie to tell the team the grid reference of their last known position. After getting the address, Peter and Skip figure out where the survivors could be. However, Skip says the survivors have only 22 hours left if they are lucky, while it will take them 27 hours to reach them, meaning they are 5 hours short. With no other choice, they decide to seek help from Wick, as he is the only man who has done the ascent faster. Skip says that 4 years ago, when a huge storm hit an American team, Wick's wife was also there as a guide. Wick went on a solo ascent with the goal of rescuing her. He was unable to save his wife, but he did rescue 3 other men, even though he lost his toes to frostbite. It turns out he still wanders the mountains searching for his wife's body. The next day, the team prepares to leave, and they are joined by Monique as well, who is lured by the offer of a $500,000 reward. The team then gets on a helicopter, and the first thing they do is locate Wick, who has been camping on the mountain. They seek his help, and at first, he is not interested in saving anyone. But when he learns that Elliot is also one of the survivors, he changes his mind for some reason. However, he asks Skip to stay at the base camp, as he needs someone he can trust there, unlike Elliot's people. Following this, the remaining team members are split into pairs to go in different directions, Kareem with Malcolm, Monique with Cyril, and Peter, who will accompany Wick himself. They then depart by helicopter, which carries them as high as possible in the mountains. After an intense struggle, they manage to land safely. Back in the crevasse, Tom's condition is getting worse due to his injuries, so Annie takes care of him. She wants to inject him with dexamethasone, but Elliot is against it and says they need to stick to the schedule, or they will all die. Annie doesn't agree with this, but Elliot suddenly tells Tom that even if help arrives, they will not be able to get him down from this altitude. He argues that Tom is doomed to die anyway, and asks him to accept it, which leaves the injured man devastated. Sometime later, it becomes harder for Annie to breathe, and just then, Elliot receives a response on the radio from Wick, who reveals that they are coming for the rescue mission. Elliot is relieved, but Annie's condition continues to worsen. Here, Tom says she needs dexamethasone, but Elliot once again refuses, insisting they must stick to the schedule. There is a frozen backpack on the other side of the crevasse containing essential supplies, but reaching it is extremely dangerous. Elsewhere, Cyril tries to place his backpack on the snow, but it immediately starts sliding away, and he is dragged along and sent hurtling down the slope at high speed. At the last moment, he manages to stop himself, as left hanging dangerously over the abyss. Back in the crevasse, Annie attempts to reach the backpack, but the snow beneath her nearly gives way, leaving her in a life-threatening situation. Meanwhile, Monique tries to help Cyril, but a layer of snow suddenly breaks beneath her feet, putting both of them dangerously hanging over the abyss. Elsewhere, Annie manages to grab the frozen backpack, and now the greater challenge is returning to safety. At the same time, while attempting to reach the nearest ledge, Cyril loses balance, and the backpack of nitroglycerin slips from his bag. It falls and detonates upon impact, triggering a massive explosion. The blast sends shock waves through the ice, and the ice bridge beneath Annie's feet immediately begins to collapse at that very moment. Elsewhere, we see Cyril manage to climb up, after which he throws off the rope and secures himself to help Monique. But unfortunately, this is witnessed by all other team members from a distance, but Peter still remains determined to find his sister and refuses to turn back. Now, Monique needs to reach the rope Cyril had thrown down, and she desperately leaps toward it. Meanwhile, Annie, who has successfully retrieved the backpack, begins searching through its supplies. She finds water, as well as 4 syringes of dexamethasone, which she finally injects into herself and Tom, while Elliot watches them furiously. Elsewhere, we see Monique has reached the surface safely and is approaching Peter. Her fingers are dislocated, so she asks him to fix them. Meanwhile, Malcolm is seen grieving for his dead brother, so Kareem urges him to turn back, and he proceeds alone. But Malcolm is determined not to give up, so he pulls himself together and continues following Kareem again. Back at the Pakistani military base, the tanks containing nitroglycerin are left under direct sunlight, which causes a massive explosion. Soon, Skip contacts Wick and says the nitro reacts to sunlight, so it must not be exposed. A panicked Wick alerts Peter about this, after which they hide the backpack with explosives in the shade, before covering it with cold snow. However, he needs to warn Malcolm and Kareem about this, but their radio is not turned on, so Peter tries to get closer to them to relay the danger. He manages to spot them in the distance and urges them to turn on the radio, before finally informing them of the situation. Without wasting any time, Malcolm and Kareem place the nitro in the shade and stop to rest, thinking the threat is over, unaware that some of the liquid has already spilled and is exposed, which will soon react with the sunlight. This causes a huge explosion that kills both of the climbers and destroys the area. After the explosion, Monique comes across the dead body of a woman, and in a shocking twist, it turns out to be Wick's wife, whom he had been searching for 4 years. This deeply affects him emotionally, and Peter discovers an empty dexamethasone box near the body. It turns out that 4 years ago, she was the guide accompanying Elliot's group, and she apparently died because Elliot had stolen her dexamethasone. This explains why Wick joined the rescue mission, as he wants revenge against Elliot for the death of his wife. Upon hearing all this, Peter tries to stop him, but the old man refuses to change his mind and later buries his wife. At the crevasse, Annie is feeling sick once again and speaks with her brother via radio, who is just 5 hours away. But Annie asks him to go back, saying she can only hold out for a maximum of 2 hours. She begs him not to come and hangs up the call, but of course, Peter is not going to change his mind. Later, while Annie is resting, Elliot also starts coughing and immediately injects himself with dexamethasone. But then, he fills the syringe with air and injects Tom, killing him instantly. At dawn, Wick tries to find Peter, but notices he has already moved ahead without him. Elsewhere, Annie finds Tom dead and immediately understands what happened, which devastates her. She angrily attacks Elliot, but during their fight, he notices that part of the snow has collapsed and light has broken through from above, giving them a glimmer of hope. With each passing time, their health begins to deteriorate, so Elliot uses a knife to draw Tom's blood, which he collects in a plastic bag. Together with Annie, they raise the package upward, and when it emerges from beneath the snow, they ignite it using flares, and the snow turns red all over. It's eventually spotted by Peter and Monique, making them very happy. They blow a whistle down and send a note warning that there will be an explosion. Moments later, Peter drains the nitro and detonates it with explosives. It finally opens a huge hole for the survivors. Up next, Elliot ties Annie to a rope, after which Peter and Monique drag her up. However, their pickaxe, which is secured to the rope, begins to slip out, and they are powerless to stop it, but Wick, who is chasing after them, manages to secure the rope and descends back into the cave with Annie. Here, Elliot understands why he is there and tries to fight back with an ice pick, but Wick easily disarms him. Surprisingly, he does not kill Elliot. Instead, he attaches a clip to him to ensure he will be rescued as well. Next, Monique and Peter attempt to pull Annie out of the crevasse, but a massive ice boulder suddenly breaks loose, and it strikes Wick and Elliot, knocking them off the ledge, while also pulling Annie and Peter downward with them. Now, Monique alone remains on the ledge, holding the rope that the others are suspended from. This creates a situation similar to the movie's opening scene, and in a shocking twist, Wick cuts the rope, sending him and Elliot plunging into the abyss to die. In the final scene, we return to the base camp, where Monique is seen treating Annie, who has managed to survive. Monique then kisses Peter before leaving, after which the man approaches his sister. The siblings joke around, and Annie calls her brother brave for his actions, saying their father would be very proud. The movie then ends with Peter paying his respects at a makeshift memorial for the climbers who died on the mountain. Thus, we reach the end of this movie. Thanks for watching. If you like the movie, support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next movie. Goodbye.